When humans touch down on a new world, the unknown of what can be found there is always a risk. This could arise as unforeseen weather patterns, risk from the environment, or the unwanted attention of the, possibly, local fauna. When you stumble across this randomly generated location, you immediately find out which category this abandoned mining rig falls into. As soon as you land, you get attacked by something called a Swarmling. One part of what we shall come to learn is a vicious and predatory species. We find them standing over their latest victim, possibly the last person to die here, someone who almost made it out. When we come across them, we can find their name is Suzanne Kaufman, and right off the bat, we get a data slate that begins to paint us the picture of what happened here.
This is Chief Kaufman on the landing deck. The platform has been attacked. There was an explosion. Creatures of some kind are swarming the platform. They look like crustaceans. Maybe they were moving too fast to tell. I had to run. Oh no, I'm the only one who made it outside. Someone in the generator room is pounding on the door to get out here. I can't go back in there.
So there's a lot to unpack in this panic log entry. We learn that Suzanne was the chief of this mining platform, which means she was in charge. She tells us that, after an explosion, a large number of creatures, one of which is now dead beside her, due to us, swarmed the platform. We'll take a closer look at them very soon, but for now, we can see her statement about them being crustacean-like is fairly accurate. Additionally, the term she used, swarm, is very apt, as that is exactly what they're identified as, Swarmlings. This suggests that there's something far greater up the food chain, and we'll get to that as we progress through the facility. She says that they were incredibly fast, which implies that she wasn't close to the point they emerged from, or she'd be dead. This is backed up by the speed at which, as we shall see, they tore through this rig. Lastly, she says she's the only one who made it out, and that others were still trapped inside. Others that were very close, as it turns out. This means that, as the chief here, she ran and refused to go back to help some of her crew, who seemed to be trapped. Now that we've got a good idea of why she was out here, we can take a look inside the rig and see just how bad things really were. Heading up the stairs to the right of her body, we come to our first sign of carnage in the interior of the facility. Two individuals can be found cut down right beside the doors, just a few steps from being out of the rig. Granted, it didn't really help Suzanne, but still, there seemed to be only one Swarmling out there, so they may have managed to get away. We can see that the emergency protocols have been enacted, so there was some degree of time to flee, and as we progress, we shall see evidence of an attempt at defense, as ineffective in the end as it may have been. Past them, we can find another body, this one actually armed, and beside it a strange residue, or excretion, likely from the Swarmlings. Maybe a digestive fluid of sorts, or something related to nesting. Past them, we can go down a corridor, and from here on out, you begin to encounter them in mass. Now, since there's so many of them here, you may be wondering what happened to all their bodies. For some reason, they kept despawning, so I'll have to cut back and forth between before and after I cleared the place. Some of them do remain, which are the ones the crews seem to manage to dispatch. In this room, which seems to be the reactor people were attempting to get out of, we can actually find two of them standing over what we can assume is a fresh kill, showing that this all has literally just happened. Looking at them up close, we can see strong facehugger influences, especially the ridge at the back of their bodies. I hesitate to say it's a spine or even bone, as they are called crustaceans more than once, which suggests that all of this is an exoskeleton of a sort. They scuttle about on 6 legs, with a large spine-like tail coming out the base of the ridge on their backs. The front 2 legs are more claw-like, though they are clearly not pincers. Between each of their appendages is a webbing of sorts, that flaps around in a manner that, to be frank, I'm really not a fan of. At the second joint from the tip of each appendage is a large mass of what looks like a mixture of muscles and exoskeleton, and from straight on it kind of looks like a skull, further adding to their demonic-like appearance. Honestly, They look like a bastard cross between a stingray and an arachnid. Or I suppose, given the leg number, insect would be more accurate. But just from the look, I think spider. So yes, they are totally the stuff of nightmares. Their face, or head, is deeply recessed into their body, and flanked by 2 mandibles. It's from here, or around here, that I assume the excretion they produce originates from. They attack by swarming you, usually in large groups. And I won't lie, there were times when I was genuinely unnerved while here. It really did seem like a proper alien horror movie. Ignoring the poor sap that was being surrounded by these 2 wee shouts, we can take a look at those who seem to have died surrounding the reactor. Though given there was no way out from here, I'm not sure why. One can be found at the bottom of the stairs, and it seems that all they had to defend themselves with was a knife, despite the box of ammo beside them. Opposite them, we can find 2 more who died facing each other. One of them seems to have been armed, though oddly enough, by the spacesuit anyway, they don't seem to have been security. The other one was. It may be that they picked up their weapon after the other person was killed. Heading back up the stairs, we come to what I assume was the control room for the reactor. Inside, we find 2 more bodies. Again, likely security and someone who was either here already when the attack started, or was fleeing, given their proximity to the door. Neither of them managed too well in the end, regardless. Outside, before we get to the remains of the crew out here, we need to talk about the swarm we encounter here. Or, more specifically, we need to talk about the next step up, at least we can assume, of the swarm's hierarchy here, the swarm sister. The first thing to note is the huge departure in appearance this creature has from the Swarmlings. Most reassuringly, the flaps are gone, thank the gods. It has the same number of limbs as the Swarmlings, although theirs have a greater degree of uniformity in them, and they're much longer, as well as extra jointed. The crustacean/spider appearance, at least to me, seems to be mostly gone as well. If I had to put a name to this, I would say ant, especially with the head. Its exoskeleton has developed considerably as well, with a far larger amount of spike-like protrusions, all of which are much thicker than those we saw on the Swarmlings. On its head, we can find a large amount of what appears to be feelers, or more likely tentacles, protruding from where I assume its mouth can be found. From here, it spits out a type of corrosive substance on you, likely used to break down its prey for easier consumption. The orange mounds on its face appear to be eyes. However, the enormous amount of them, as well as the non-uniformity, has me a bit puzzled. There are way too many, and as such would offer too many conflicting points of view for the creature, as well as likely leave blind spots. I wouldn't think they're the result of evolution, and given what we find out about the origins of these creatures later, it's odd they have eyes at all. They could just be growths of a sort, but if that is the case, I don't really see why the Swarmlings do not have them. They are called the Swarm Sisters, and as they are one of the 3 forms we see, suggest they're either a subspecies, or what the Swarmlings one day develop into. Without more information, we can only speculate. On this level of the platform, we can find what seems like both the first line of defense, and possibly the furthest the majority of the fleeing non-combatants, i.e. the researchers and workers here, made it. We can find 2 people cut down just as we make our way onto the level. Behind them, we can find what seems to be a hastily constructed defense point, although the plethora of bodies should be able to tell you exactly how well that turned out. Also, note the absence of even a single swarmling body, suggesting this didn't really achieve much in the end. To be fair, given this is outside, they were probably hit before a large number of people inside. And if this was indeed the first line of defense, then they had the least time to prepare. They do, for the most part, however, seem to be trained combatants, or at least I'm going to assume the security was trained. I expect more than one worker just picked up a weapon, as the alternative was a gruesome death at the hands of the crustacean nation. One of the more tragic bodies we find is located in a container situated behind the defense point. It looks like they got injured, crawled back here for some first aid, and were either attacked again, or, in my opinion, died due to their injuries. The strangest body, however, is one of a possible immortal. Found in the container opposite this person, we find a woman who seems to have went outside without a spacesuit and engaged the swarm in close quarters combat with a fucking broom. Honestly, this is probably just a mistake on the developer's part, and this body was meant to be equipped with a spacesuit. But I personally prefer the idea of a woman going fuck it, deciding the vacuum of space was beneath her notice, and engaging a swarm of otherworldly horrors with a length of wood. Also, did she steal all the first aid kits on her way out? Because if she did, she's indirectly responsible for probably more than a few deaths. Now we'll come back to the area that's one level up from here later, as the area of interest is actually locked from the other side of the door. However, what we find is one of the few successful counterattacks we see against the swarm. 4 people gave their lives to bring down just one swarm sister. This just goes to show not only how deadly these things were, but also how capable, or perhaps lucky, another character we come to later was. I have no idea what this person over here was doing. It looks like they just died while drinking some coffee or tea. Also, that's a weird point as well. We need a spacesuit out here to survive. So how are they drinking liquids here? We can also find up the stairs what looks like an outdoor poker game with several beers floating around. Maybe I'm just being stupid, and there is something in the lore in regards to spacesuits having a means to intake liquids. Obviously, opening the Hamlet isn't an answer. But then there's also the issue of when the planet is below freezing. Yeah, I think for stuff like this, the random placement of certain areas makes little sense. But getting away from that tangent, they could have just died before everyone else, which could explain why they are just sitting here while their co-workers engaged in a deathmatch with an alien. The last thing on the below level to take a look at is this person here. From the plethora of grenades around them, I wonder if they planned, at the end, to detonate them when the swarm got close, sacrificing themselves in the process. It doesn't seem to have worked out, whatever their plan was. After this, we can head up to the next level. It is here that we encounter the Swarm Mother, who looks exactly like the Swarm Sisters, unfortunately. She's just stronger. Also here is the last line of defense. It looks like they managed to get this one set up a little better than the last. Although, again, in the end, it doesn't seem to have helped them out very much. There are also less bodies, but that doesn't necessarily mean they perform better. Behind them, we can find someone who is making a run for what, to me anyway, was a far more defensible point. Provided the glass held, there was only one entry into this room, and these things seemed hell-bent on killing everyone here, so they probably would have just continued to throw themselves at them. To me, then, this would have been a better point of defense, even if it afforded no exit. One last body can be found outside of that room, looking like they also tried to make a break for it. As you can see, they didn't get very far. Given that all the other defenders look like they died together, I don't think they were one of them. Heading up the stairs, we can head deeper into the facility. However, before that, there is another strange character that seems to have had some degree of success defending themselves. Now, the gun may be randomly generated. If not, then they managed to kill 3 of these things with a rivet gun, before something else brought them down, or their injuries did. It does make you wonder why so few of the rest of the staff here managed to kill any of them at all. Heading back inside, we can find the only death here that I speculate was not directly as a result of the swarm, putting aside, of course, Broom Woman, and anyone who died of their injuries if she did steal all the medical supplies. This person was likely killed by the turret present in this room directly opposite the door. Also, why did the rest of this facility not have more turrets, given it had a large amount of armed guards and at least one, suggesting they saw at least some need to be prepared for possible violence. Here, you can also find another dead swarmling, with the culprit likely the person that died behind this piece of large machinery. At least, I think it was them. Honestly, as I said, some bodies despawned here, so this may just be one that didn't. I am sure the ones in the next room, however, were not ones I killed. Not so much about this one. Taking a look at the underside, I really do think these things look more like ants than crustaceans, at least from this angle. It looks like an ant that said, if betwixt our legs we flap, then our swarm will slap. Just a strange creature overall. Up the stairs, we can find what appears to be the control room for the rig. It is here that we find the only other Slate present, and the last place that has dead Swarmlings and Swarm Sisters. So first, let's take a look at this Slate.
Gabe, can you see down to the main deck? Is there anyone alive down there? I don't know, man. I can't hear anything. Those crabs are just gonna keep coming. Where the hell are they coming from? We Check the ocean. There's no life down there. I think we brought them up here. What? Yeah. You know that barrier we've been trying to punch the drill through for the past week? Well, this morning we broke through. But it wasn't oil that came up. It was those creatures. I was here in the control room. Hundreds of those creatures climbed out of the drill tube. Oh shit. That was the explosion? Yeah.
So the man that looked like they killed a swarm sister all on their own is Abhay Cherian, and yes, I'm probably mispronouncing that. And they sound way too calm during all of this. He begins by asking someone called Gabriel Davis if anyone is alive on the main deck, which is likely the one we just came up from. That they couldn't hear anything suggests that, at this point, all the defenses have been overrun and the swarm was approaching them. I assume the person in the chair, or dead below, is Gabriel. We'll get to the rest of the details on that slate after we've checked out the crew quarters. But Abhay thinks that they came from beneath the ice. How Abhay managed to kill this thing on his own, I have no idea, but he must have been pretty capable if that is the case. Unfortunately, the terminals give us no information, simply stating that they cannot reach the engineers, which sounds about right as they're all likely dead at this point. Next to these workstations we can find one more dead body, before we come to the second most capable person in the room. I don't know who they were, but they managed to kill a lot of Swarmlings on their own before they died, more than most. All that is left is to head to the crew quarters. Now, it is here that we come up against one of our last parts of the swarm, and the reason they are all massed here is because the worst slaughter in the whole building likely occurred here. Inside, we can find many of the crew, who likely fled all the way up here instead of down, as we saw how that ended. Inside these quarters, it's just a shit show. They never stood a chance, and the swarm just tore through them, killing all of them before we got here. Again, I would have thought this would be defendable. However, we find, to the best of my recollection, no guns here, suggesting that they were all unarmed. Many may have been wounded, and when the line of defense in the control room and on the main deck fell, so too did it fall here. Down the back of the room, we can find the only exit still locked, and quite a few bodies here. So it seems that they all piled up against the door, panicking, and in that panic, never thought to unlock it and run. Not that it would have helped, of course, as there were more outside, but still. In here as well, we can find one more terminal entry. It gives us no information regarding what happened here. Just a simple entry from someone called Sam, asking people to stop eating the care packages their mother sends them. Despite the data slates we've listened to, despite the harrowing scenes we've seen, this is probably the saddest thing on this whole rig. So this was the swarm that slaughtered the entire crew of a mining rig. We see them in their, presumably, infant form, the Swarmling, looking incredibly crab/ant-like, and this was the majority of the force that swept over this rig. The larger, similar-looking swarm sisters and swarm mothers have a very different appearance from the younger ones, if they are in fact the same species, and not just distinct ones living in some sort of symbiosis. According to Abhay, underneath the world they were on is a large ocean, of which their surveys had concluded there was no life to be found. However, Abhay tells us that there was a large barrier that, for the last week, they had been attempting to punch through. Given that it stopped their drill for about a week, we can assume it was a bedrock of some sorts. He then states that when they punched through, these creatures came swarming out, and in the process, the drill exploded, possibly due to damage inflicted by the creatures. What it punched into remains a bit of a mystery. Given their appendages, I hesitate to say they were completely aquatic. However, they state they are crustacean-like in appearance, and they did emerge from beneath a section of this world's ocean. So perhaps some sort of subterranean environment, possibly an ocean onto itself. This may explain the appearance of the Swarmlings. The webbing/flaps were to aid their mobility in the water. This does, however, leave the question of how the sisters and the mother managed to move about. Yes, they do look similar to shrimp or lobsters, but they just look too large to be able to effectively move about in an ocean like that. It could be, however, that they are in fact not from a subterranean ocean, and that it is in fact just a cave system or similar terrain. There is also the possibility that they are in fact creatures that would generally dwell on the surface of the planets they inhabit, and the crew has just missed them up to now. That could mean that the barrier was a nest of sorts, but in the end, we may never know. All we can say for sure is that their drilling caused the creatures to descend on the platform, and, as far as we're aware, kill everyone on it. Some tried to hide, some stood and fought, with varying degrees of success. Some tried to just run, although to where, given the lack of a ship when we land, I'm not certain. In the case of Suzanne, she was one of several who ran, and seemed to leave behind some of the others, before herself being slain by the swarm. When we arrive, all we can do is avenge them, to exterminate the creatures that have infested the rig. But even with all of that said and done, we're left with the question of whether or not these creatures are only of this world, and if not, how many more are out there?